Part 44. I'm Really Immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ryu Siahua. Chapter 443. Nuan hung up the phone and recalled Qinyanan's expression. She immediately raised her eyebrows and opened her mouth slightly. After her smile bloomed, all the pride in her heart couldn't stop spreading on her beaming face like colorful flowers in spring. Come on. She did take her real estate certificate with her when she went out, but she didn't accidentally get it wet. She wrapped it in a waterproof plastic bag and put it in the inner compartment of her bag, so that it wouldn't get wet even if it fell into the sea. But who lets Qinyanan bully others too much? Why should you be so polite when you show your face to someone? Lu Chang'an told her after Nuan left. In fact, many ordinary things can be reorganized using profound language to give ambiguous meanings. Although Nuan likes to be jealous, even Qinyanan did use the sentence to arouse her jealousy, but how could Nuan lose his mind due to jealousy so easily? After all, one learns from the experience. The last time Qinyanan dangled the key in front of her, Nuan later thought about how obviously frustrated she was. Didn't it encourage Qinyanan's arrogance? Although today's situation was a bit unexpected, it was one of the scenarios that Nuan had simulated many times in her mind. Moreover, Qinyanan did not come up with a trump card like last time. Nuan naturally dealt with it calmly and finally let her down. And return. Nuan took her cell phone and looked at the picture she had taken. She couldn't help covering her mouth and laughed. Then she raised her legs high, kicked her slippers arrogantly, and walked step by step to the bedroom. The room was booked by Grandpa. Originally, he only booked 2 double rooms with full sea views, but later the hotel upgraded them to sea view pool rooms. When Nuan came to the bedroom, Lu Yuwang was changing into his swimsuit and preparing to go to the sky pool attached to the room. Taking a dip in it, even though you can only see the coast illuminated by hotel lights in the dark, and was his Hu Island, which lies dormant on the sea like a giant beast in the distance, it also avoids the damage to the skin caused by ultraviolet rays during the day. Feeling the tranquility, music, and books in the dark sea breeze is so suitable for tasteful and exquisite women. The sunshine and noisy beach are too impetuous. Mom, what kind of swimsuit did you change into in the middle of the night? Nuan asked strangely. There is no other way. I can't bear to use my son-in-law's sunscreen to smear all over my body. Lu Yuwang's heart ached just thinking about it. It was too luxurious. Think about it, your face is more important, so just save it and apply it on your face. I just drank a lot of milk tea. I feel like I can't sleep, it feels so good to take a dip, listen to music, and read a book. I hate it. I talked about son-in-law and son-in-law with my grandparents today. It's so unpleasant. Nuan poked her cheek and hummed shyly, I'm blushing. Are you blushing? You're elated, Lu Yuwang sneered. Besides, he climbed through the window and entered your room in the middle of the night. He has already done this, and he may be even more outrageous in the future, until now. For my sake, what's wrong with me calling my son-in-law? I'm telling you, I'll call him in front of him again and ask him to give me more cream. You want to sell your daughter just to order some facial cream? Nuan hummed angrily and asked, how many bottles of facial cream can I sell? Lu Yuwang stretched out his fingers to calculate, frowned, and said nothing. He pulled up the ties of his swimming trunks and walked to the mirror to take a look. Mom, I just heard from Qinyanan that there is a designer brand of underwear in the duty-free shop, which seems to be pretty good. Nuan asked, with her own plans in mind. She couldn't just use it to tease her because it was Qinyanan. It's so exciting to think about the next time you accidentally mention to Qinyanan, I bought a set of that brand you introduced last time, and Lu Chang'an said it's very good looking. It's so exciting. Why are you smiling like that? Lu Yuwang turned around and looked at Nuan inexplicably. That brand looks good, but how can I wear it? There are very few large sizes, but you can go check it out. Look. Shall we go to the duty-free shop? If we go there again, I'll go and have a look at this time, and Nuan couldn't care less about being discriminated against by two hateful big-breasted people in one night. Of course, the purpose of shopping for the first time is to remind yourself. When you go there for the second time, don't you realize what you didn't buy last time? Your grandpa and grandma's tax-free quota is used very little, so it can't be wasted. The moonlight is not enough. Great. Buy me another set of 406, 410, 411, and 412 that you bought today. My 401 and 413 will be given to you. And Nuan quickly got down to business. What are you doing? Those two colors are too old-fashioned. When I bought them, I told them they weren't suitable for you. Lu Yuwang didn't like the effect of wearing red lips with blood inflammation. I thought this color would be more sexy, wouldn't it look amazing on a pink girl with a bright and hot lip color, and Nuan regretted a little, as her attainments in cosmetics were still too low. Then you have to be able to control it. Some people call it sexy style, and some people call it village girl style. Good mother, you can definitely do it. Doesn't it look good no matter what color you apply? And Nuan buried herself in Lu Yuwang's chest and acted coquettishly. Of course, okay, you stay with me for a while, and I'll buy it for you. Lu Yuwang agreed to this slightly humbly, without taking it for granted with arrogant eyes. Okay, and Nuan agreed happily, smiling immediately. Mom, why are you so easy to talk to now? I didn't know that you are just obsessed with dressing up because of Lu Chang'an. When a girl is in love, the last thing she needs is cosmetics and skincare products. Lu Yuwang knew it all. Hey. And Nuan smiled sheepishly, and while changing into her swimsuit, she told Lu Yuwang about her proud record of defeating Qin Yanan just now. Qin Yanan is a cousin, much older than Lu Chang'an, and a teacher at school. If she really wanted to steal Nuan's boyfriend, how shameless would it be? Lu Yuwang felt that this possibility was unlikely, but Qin Yanan might object to Lu Chang'an and Nuan being together. Lu Yuwang was a little regretful that he could not ask Qin Yanan to help buy a rice cooker at such a big discount. After a while, Nuan and Lu Yuwang were soaking in the swimming pool together, and Nuan made a video call to Lu Chang'an. Lu Yuwang was raising his legs to splash in the water. When he heard Lu Chang'an's voice, he quickly shrank and hid under the water, with only his head exposed. Nuan is actually in the same state. The water is not clear at night. Lu Chang'an could only express regret. You have a beautiful idea. Nuan chuckled with a slightly shy expression. Lu Yuwang rolled her eyes at her. This daughter really had no choice but to let herself go. Sometimes she just wanted to do something extraordinary, but she had to do enough on the surface. Sooner or later, you will get what you want. Lu Chang'an showed a determined look. I hate it, my mother is here. And Nuan continued to be shy. Oh, then let me say hello to Professor Lu. Lu Chang'an was very polite. No, and Nuan immediately refused. Lu Yuwang frowned. This child is really jealous of everyone. It is definitely possible that he is jealous of Qin Yanan too much, so Qin Yanan simply confronts her, but Qin Yanan doesn't care, he is the elder after all. Lu Chang'an can really, anyway, her jealousy was unreasonable. Lu Yuwang calmly turned his head and looked at Hsu Island in the South China Sea. Lu Chang'an and Nuan chatted for a while, and Nuan hung up the video call after confirming that Qin Yanan had gone back and was not causing any more trouble. Lu Chang'an hung up the phone, looked at the screen and smiled, sending a rare good night emoji to Nuan. Nuan immediately sent a bunch of messy emoticons, seemingly very surprised and happy. Lu Chang'an stopped exchanging emojis with her. The largest storage space in Nuan's mobile phone was all kinds of emoticons. There is a saying that is right, the more girls like to be funny when chatting, there is no lower limit. The more adorable and invincible beautiful girl she is in reality. For example, among the girls Lu Chang'an knows, the one who likes stupid, fool-like, mentally retarded pictures and expressions the most is Nuan, followed by Zhu Huntang, and then by Hui. This ranking is very subjective, because Lu Chang'an actually doesn't chat with people on social software very much anymore. Professor Lu was once an exception, and his chat style is certainly an exception. The pictures such a beautiful Professor Lu likes to post are quite serious, for example two glittering hands clapped, such as the two big words good night shining brightly, such as the internet is connected by a thread, cherish this fate. Lu Chang'an was about to go to sleep when there was a knock on the door. Lu Chang'an went to open the door and found Zhou Shuling standing at the door holding a basin filled with beef slices. Would you like a midnight snack? Zhou Shuling looked around a few times while talking. What time is it? Didn't we have a midnight snack before we came back? Lu Chang'an took out his mobile phone to show her the time. Oh, I'm not looking at Miss Jean, I want to greet the guests. Zhou Shuling was very reasonable. You have a store to look after, an inconvenient child, and you have to worry about my gossip. Are you tired? Lu Chang'an took a piece of beef and stuffed it into his mouth, then knocked her on the forehead. My hands are oily. Zhou Shuling's cheeks were slightly red. Why don't I just help you greet the guests? It's really free. Leave the beef and go back to bed. Lu Chang'an brought the basin over and pushed Zhou Shuling out. Zhou Shuling took 2 steps and pointed at the basin, save a few slices and make noodles to eat tomorrow morning. Lu Chang'an closed the door, shook his head, ate beef, and watched TV for a while, then went to bed. On the Mid-Autumn Festival on August 15 of the Dinju year, it was also the National Day holiday. Lu Chang'an kept pace with the times and no longer made traditional mooncakes. He planned to make some ice cream mooncakes. Qin Yan'an returned to the Qin family's old house and prepared to meet Qin Peng. She originally wanted to invite Lu Chang'an to go with her, but Lu Chang'an refused. It was not for any other reason, but because of how to position his relationship with Ye Sijin, Qin Yan'an wanted to go with her. Peng and him had different opinions. Now that Qin Yan'an knew her original identity, he was afraid that Qin Peng would bring up the old issues with him again. Lu Chang'an was too lazy to talk nonsense with this bad old man who was trying to pull red strings. While making mooncakes, Lu Chang'an's eyes twitched, and he suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. He should still go, at least he could stop Qin Peng from blowing wind in Qin Yan'an's ear. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 444. Most of the time, festivals when everyone gathers together to prepare a meal are traditional festivals of the country, while festivals where everyone goes to open a house are basically foreign festivals. The Mid-Autumn Festival is of course one of the most important traditional festivals. Since ancient times, countless people who have not been reunited have looked up at the bright moon in foreign lands and shed tears. There are also many literati and poets who have raised their glasses to the bright moon and left poems chanting to the moon during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Among them, the leader is undoubtedly Sushi's Shui Tiao Songtu, When Will the Bright Moon Come? This poem, no matter who copies it, can make the poets in that world lament that it will be difficult to write Mid-Autumn Festival poems in the future. The ice cream mooncakes made by Lu Chang'an are not snowskin mooncakes, but the ice cream is made into mooncakes. It is still more suitable for southerners to eat ice cream during the Mid-Autumn Festival, and finally prepare a gluttonous feast of ice cream. Since Shui Tiao Getou When Will the Bright Moon Come is one of the top Mid-Autumn Festival poems, then my ice cream mooncake will be based on this theme and named Xining 9th year 1076. This year 1076 is the year when Sushi wrote this poem. The year is also the number of grams of ice cream mooncakes he made this time. It's just that much, no more. Of course, you won't make just one mooncake that weighs more than 2 kilograms. Ice cream mooncakes are not suitable for eating too much at one time. Eating 3 at a time would be a bit cold for the stomach. Lu Chang'an calculated the ingredients and decided on the number of pieces. As for the taste, of course, the taste should not be too high. The only ingredients he purchased were vanilla, strawberry, macadamia nut, mango, and fragrant milk flavors. There was basically only one flavor for each flavor. Thinking about it, Joe Dongdong knew that it was impossible to eat all the flavors, so how to choose his favorite flavor? It will definitely be very difficult and painful, but it is also an interesting situation. He knew that Zhou Shuling was also inventing a new flavor for snowskin mooncakes. Lu Chang'an didn't have any expectations. Lu Chang'an wouldn't be surprised at all if she wanted to make mooncakes with pig's trotters flavor. Nowadays, when people celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival, it is no longer mainstream to hold cultural gatherings. Everyone carries mooncakes to visit relatives, and looks at the moon and eats mooncakes together at night, which is very festive. Most people don't care about the form. It would be nice to have a meal with the people you want to see during the festival. Qin Yinan wanted to catch the meal on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, so she didn't need to go too far in advance. She booked her tickets early and arrived at the South High-Speed Railway station on the morning of the Mid-Autumn Festival. Qin Yinan walked into the business class VIP lounge in the West Plaza. There is a separate security check channel here, so there is no need to queue up. There are quite a lot of people today, and a woman like her will encounter a lot of harassment when traveling alone. In fact, it is unavoidable in this kind of lounge. There are many people who can buy business seats at several times the price of second-class seats, who feel good about themselves but lose their sense of propriety. Relatively speaking, the resting conditions here are average, incomparable to the top VIP lounges in some major airports. Qin Yinan walked to a corner with a black luggage bag and sat down. There was a girl sitting next to her, holding a newspaper that seemed to be much larger than her body and holding it high to read. The girl was wearing a pair of red wedge heels, which made a coquettish look in contrast with the snow-white insteps. Charming, looking at the pretty cute patterns on the skirt, she probably looks young. Qin Yinan had just sat down and put her luggage bag at her feet. The girl next to her put down the newspaper and turned to look at Qin Yinan. Sunangziu, Qin Yinan felt that it must be because she didn't look at the almanac when she went out today. If she turned it over now, she would definitely see "Avoid traveling" written on the almanac. Sunangziu glanced at Qin Yinan, turned her head casually, and put the newspaper up again. Qin Yinan never thought that she would meet Sunangziu here, because when Sunangziu used her identity as the third wife, she was very grand, with luxury motorcades and private jets. This kind of scene of a person sitting in a corner waiting for the high-speed train was really too rare. The chair was a bit high and wide. Sunangziu moved her buttocks and sat on the innermost side to lean on. She raised her feet and raised them up. She held the newspaper to block herself, then turned around and faced Qin Yinan with the newspaper. Only then did Qin Yinan notice that Sunangziu was not tall. Why did she seem to be not much shorter than him in the original impression? I guess it was her bossy and arrogant attitude that affected my impression of her. Qin Yinan had originally planned how to deal with Sunangziu when she met her again and negotiate some issues with her, but today unexpectedly her mood was affected and she was reluctant to talk to her. But now Sunangziu was holding a newspaper and facing Qin Yinan, but Qin Yinan felt that Sunangziu was deliberately provoking herself. Qin Yinan didn't believe that Sunangziu was reading news articles and current affairs articles carefully behind the newspaper. She might be thinking about something, and her eyes were rolling. Sunangziu, what a coincidence! Qin Yinan stretched out a piece of paper and pressed it down on the top of Sunangziu's newspaper. Sunangziu's head was exposed, and her neat bangs covered a pair of eyes that were staring at Qin Yinan, as if they were two beads carved from black jade inlaid in the eye sockets, exuding a kind of enchantment that was definitely not cute. Breath. I didn't read the almanac when I went out today. Sunangziu shook his newspaper, took it away from Qin Yinan's fingers, and then stood it up to block between herself and Qin Yinan. I should have said this before I knew it. Qin Yinan secretly hated herself for being too gentle after all, and not ready for a tit-for-tat confrontation as soon as she came up. This is your first time taking the high-speed rail. Qin Yinan calmed down and reminded her kindly, there are a lot of people when you get on the train. Don't get squeezed because you are so small. Childish Sunangzio's faint voice came from behind the newspaper. Such ridicule was obviously meaningless to Sunangzio, who could change his body. It was not like Qinyanan didn't know this. After a few words, Qinyanan took out his cell phone. After a while, there was a noise next to him. Qinyanan raised his head and took a look. It seemed that a man wearing a mask, sunglasses, and a hat was about to sit over. He and two other women were surrounded by someone who didn't know when. The tall, muscular man who appeared blocked him. "Sir, there are so many seats, so there is no need for you to sit over here," a strong man with a crew cut reminded him in a gentle tone. "This is my freedom, I can sit wherever I want," the man said, unconvinced. "That's the truth, but please cooperate," the strong man with a flat head still persuaded. "Since this is the case, I will sit here. I have no obligation to cooperate with you." The man raised his finger with a slight sneer. "If you are government personnel performing tasks, please show your ID. Then we don't dare to pretend, but we are free to stand here," the strong man with a flat head said. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the several strong men who had been surrounding each other stood in a row, sealing the entire aisle, as if a wall suddenly appeared. I want to call the police," the man said angrily. "Please don't cause too much trouble, it will delay your schedule," the strong man with a flat head smiled gently. Obviously he often dealt with this kind of situation. "Forget it," a woman behind the man said softly. The man also hesitated and called the police. The real police came to deal with it, but he was afraid that his trip would be delayed. "Sunangzio, who cares about you? This is not Taiwan." Qinyanan couldn't stand it and stared at Sunangzio coldly. Can she still not understand at this time? Apart from protecting Sunangzio, these people had no other reason to block in front. It can't be said that there is no reason to stop the man from coming over, because in the eyes of these security personnel, if a person wearing sunglasses and a mask insists on approaching Sunangzio, even if he just wants to sit here, he must be careful, let alone ordinary people. When encountering this kind of situation, everyone would cooperate and leave and choose another location, but this man was particularly persistent. There are also people who have such a stubborn temper, but as a security guard, you cannot consider other people's tempers and will only handle emergencies in accordance with emergency procedures. "I almost forgot. In Juncha, you are a little princess. If you want to show off your power, of course you have to do it." Sunangzio put down the newspaper and raised his finger. Only then did the strong men disperse and sit down around them. Only the strong man with a flat head came to stand next to Sunangzio. "Thank you for disturbing me just now." The man who was blocked just now came over and thanked Qinyanan. Qinyanan smiled and nodded. It was a trivial matter and she didn't want to say anything polite. If she didn't dislike Sunangzio, she wouldn't bother to care about such things. Those guys turned out to be your bodyguards. It was really a misunderstanding. After the man thanked him, he had no intention of leaving. Instead, he sat down, and the two women who followed him also sat next to him. "Us," Qinyanan frowned. "Aren't you sisters?" the man said in astonishment. "If we are sisters, then you will be brothers with a stallion in heat, right?" Sunangzio rested her chin on her palm and looked at the man coldly. Qinyanan couldn't help but roll her eyes at Sunangzio. This was a rare thing they had in common. They were really cousins, but no one was willing to mention this relationship. "Of course I'm not." The man was stunned for a moment, took off his sunglasses and mask, and showed his signature smile and gestures. "Let's get to know each other. I guess I don't need to introduce myself. What do you call me?" Qinyanan looked at the man, stunned for a moment, then turned back to look at Sunangzio. Sunangzio also glanced at Qinyanan, then turned away, ignoring Qinyanan's doubts and ignoring the man. "I'm Cai Guancan, maybe you didn't recognize me." It should be impossible not to recognize him. It's probably because he didn't recognize him. How could a young woman of this age not recognize him? Cai Guancan is still confident that the other party will immediately show a surprised expression. Qin Yanan nodded politely and didn't explain much that he really didn't know him, but he also understood that he was probably a little star or something. He probably wasn't as famous as Xie Guancan, so Qin Yanan knew Xie Guancan. It's your turn. Cai Guancan put on the mask again so as not to cause a commotion in the waiting room. What? Qin Yanan turned her head habitually. Because of her tutoring and polite habits, when strangers and unfamiliar people spoke to her enthusiastically or politely, she would consciously adjust her expression to listen carefully, and then turn her head to face other side. It's your turn to introduce yourself. Cai Guancan still had the smile of an enthusiastic and sunny boy who wanted to play with the opposite sex he admired. No need. Qin Yanan understood. She was dissatisfied with looking at Sunangziu. She never thought that Cai Guancan was not targeting Sunangziu, but wanted to get close to her. Instead, he was causing trouble for himself, so his tone was cold. He stood down and regained his cold and distant expression. Anyway, it's time to be idle. Make friends. Cai Guancan was a little frustrated and felt that he couldn't live with his face. Since he became famous, he rarely took the initiative to chat with beautiful women. After all, he had to take into account his own image and the impact of gossip, but this real person in front of him, it gives people a feeling that it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience and that if you miss it, you may regret it in this life. Tisk tisk, look at your ability to attract bees and butterflies, you are such a little slut. Sunangziu gloated while watching the show. Qin Yanan was a little annoyed. This person must know his interests and be self-aware. If it swells or floats, something could easily happen. Cai Guancan raised his chin slightly, bit his lip under the mask, stared at Sunangziu with angry eyes. Why did this little girl have such a damaged mouth? He knew very well that when he made such an expression, girls would often scream. No wonder your brother always wanted to take you with him back then. He was afraid of your romantic temperament. Don't tell me that when you asked me to let him come over just now, you didn't think that he was coming for you. Who would believe it? Sunangziu looked at Qin Yanan's flushed face and continued to add fuel to the fire happily. How could she wait until now if she didn't feel happy? Stop talking to me. Qin Yanan took a deep breath, raised his hand and put it on his chest, warning Cai Guancan that enough was enough. You can't deprive me of my rights and freedom. Cai Guancan looked at Qin Yanan stubbornly. He knew that if he hadn't been so tough and wanted to break out just now, the beauty in front of him might not have taken action to greet him. He was very good at combining the softness and delicateness of femininity with masculinity. The toughness of his temperament can change inadvertently, which is what makes his personality particularly charming. Shut up. Qin Yanan felt that Sunangziu was about to beep again, glared at Sunangziu angrily, took out the phone and dialed. Seeing her calling, Sunangziu and Cai Guancan didn't rush to say anything. Captain Kong, well, yes, happy Mid-Autumn Festival, but I have something to trouble you with. I am in the business class waiting room of South Station, and there is a man named Cai Guancan who has been harassing me. He is probably a small star. Michi is barely 1.8 meters tall, wearing a hat and a red coat. There are 3 of them, 1 boy and 2 girls. Okay, trouble. Qin Yanan hung up the phone and took a breath. Beauty, are you going too far? Are you looking for someone? I haven't done anything, and I'm 1.83 meters tall. Cai Guancan didn't give up. Didn't he just strike up a conversation? How big of a deal can it be? If she wanted to call someone, would she still dare to hit someone in a high-speed rail station? There are many security guards here, and outside the door are riot police with guns and ammunition ready. Qin Yanan ignored Cai Guancan and just looked at his phone. Sunangziu felt a little bored. This way of dealing with it was too normal, so it was not interesting at all. It would be interesting if Lu Chang'an was here. After a while, 2 plainclothes men came over without greeting Qin Yanan. After showing their IDs, they mentioned Cai Guancan. Why? Cai Guancan refused and insisted on his own character. You have a good temper. You just asked us to take you away to prevent you from further harassment, but we have a bad temper. One of the plainclothes sneered and pushed Cai Guancan. What a treasure. Cai Guancan hesitated for a moment and didn't resist anymore. He couldn't figure out the identity of the woman he was chatting with, but today he obviously hit the iron plate. He felt that he was just chatting up, but it seemed that he didn't have the final say on how to define it. Now he just regretted introducing himself. If this got out, the company's public relations would have to be busy again, and he would have to be scolded and punished. After all, he is not the kind of big name who starts his own company and is the boss to promote and package himself. Another plainclothes man blocked the two women who were following Cai Guancan, followed him, and led the three people out of the waiting room. Sunangzio sat on the left side of Qinyanan, and Qinyanan raised her left hand to cover her cheek. It made me laugh. Just now, you looked like you couldn't stand other people's privileges. You said this is not Taiwan. What do you mean now? Hypocrisy, hypocrisy, hypocrisy. Sunangzio's laughter was sharp and high. It rises and falls again, which is particularly stinging. But it's normal. You've been like this since you were a child, following your brother with a soft-spoken and obedient attitude. In fact, you have the same thoughts and methods as me, so don't be so pretentious, okay? Qinyanan did feel embarrassed, but he also thought about what he would do if Lu Chang'an were here. With his temper, I'm afraid Cai Guancan will at least get a beating. He especially doesn't like others to mess with his sister. Now of course Qinyanan understands that he is an older brother. Wouldn't this be the case for an older brother when he sees men with different agendas approaching his sister? What are you thinking about? Sunangzio watched suspiciously as the expression on Qinyanan's face turned shy and sweet. This yearning look was too suspicious. It's nothing. Some men used to harass me. They didn't even talk to me like Cai Guancan. They were beaten by my brother. Qinyanan frowned slightly and pouted. He was too domineering. As he said this, Qinyanan's eyes moved. After taking a look at Sunangzio, he lowered his head and poked around on the phone screen with a finger, and pulled out Lu Chang'an's photo. Just poke, no matter how hard you poke, it's still someone else's boyfriend who comes out, Sunangzio sneered. Who can say for sure what will happen in the future? Didn't you discuss marriage with my brother back then? Qinyanan's eyebrows narrowed, as if she didn't care. This Nuan doesn't seem to be as fond of committing suicide as Su Mei back then. But her ability to be jealous is pretty much the same. Who knows if she will do it? Qinyanan just analyzed it objectively. Subjectively, she didn't think too much about it. No matter who he chose, she was still called sister-in-law anyway. Whether it was Sunangzio or Nuan, they both disliked her. I have a good relationship with my sister-in-law, but I don't know if my brain is damaged. The waiter came over to remind people waiting for the bus to be ready for inspection. Qinyanan and Sunangzio stood up at the same time and glanced at each other. Qinyanan couldn't help but wonder, a train? So Sunangzio was probably here to see the old man. What did she want to do? Big chapter, please vote for me. I recommend a book called Take a Hunting Space with You. It's a very interesting novel that friends will probably like. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 445. The business seats of this high-speed rail train set are at the front of car number 8, with a 1-1, 2-1 layout. Qinyanan and Sunangzio sit on 2 seats side by side in front, with an aisle in between. Her bodyguard did not come in, but stood in the aisle between carriage 8 and the rear second-class seats. After the automatic door closed, several tall and strong men made the flight attendants serving the business seats press against the wall nervously. Qin Yinan was already sure that Sunangzio's destination was the same as hers, and she had reason to visit Qin Peng. After all, these were the only friends who were still alive when they were children. But Sunangzio's purpose is definitely not simple. She has met Qin Peng countless times as the third wife over the years, but now that her true identity is exposed, the meaning of meeting Qin Peng again will definitely be different. Coincidentally, Qin Yinan's visit to Qin Peng this time had a different meaning, because she already knew that she was actually the cousin of the grandfather who had been called her great-grandfather for so many years. The person who has been called third aunt for so many years is actually her cousin. The person I have called my great-grandmother for so many years is actually me. I am my great-grandmother, very good and powerful. These relationships can still be sorted out, simple and clear. The high-speed train unit accelerated forward, and the real-time speed on the upper display screen jumped very fast, just like Qin Yinan's mood skyrocketed to irritability. The flight attendant came in and asked about the destination in a low voice without checking the ticket. He asked if he needed a cold blanket, drinks, and food, and left after receiving a rejection. After the flight attendant walked out, he saw the tall and muscular men with expressionless faces. He thought that the two passengers inside had a strong aura, but when they spoke, they were gentle and kind, with a light and cultivated smile, which made people not feel uncomfortable. Nervous. The service industry can encounter all kinds of mentally retarded people. The higher quality of passengers can also make people feel more relaxed. They will not worry about something happening suddenly when they are responsible, such as asking friends and relatives of other seats to come to business. For example, asking for a lot of bottles of drinks, asking for free products for sale, and even asking the flight attendant to give him a massage. Qin Yinan and Sunangzio were the only ones left in the carriage. Qin Yinan sat motionless. From the corner of his eye, he noticed that Sunangzio was constantly adjusting the height and angle of the seat and footrest. She lay down and sat up again, endlessly. "Can you please stop?" Qin Yinan said angrily. "It's not like there are noise-canceling headphones provided on the plane. You can't deprive me of my rights and freedoms." Sunangzio imitated Cai Guancan. Qin Yinan was furious. There was no doubt that Cai Guancan had pestered him just now and became a black spot for Qin Yinan in Sunangzio's eyes. Sunangzio would have to talk about this in the future. Sunangzio threw the lumbar cushion aside, adjusted it to a semi-lying position, raised her red leather shoes and stepped on the footrest, then took a newspaper prepared in the carriage and read it. "Are you going to see, the old man?" Qin Yinan still has the habit of calling him great-grandfather. He will not forget this habit for a while, but it feels a little embarrassing when he thinks about it. Sunangzio made a sound from her nose. "What do you want to do?" Qin Yinan became alert, as expected. Reminiscing about old times, Sunangzio turned around. "You still can't remember what happened in the past, right? Hey, I really want you to know how disgusting you were before." "I won't hate myself," Qin Yinan sneered. "People will always find reasons for their actions, not to mention I don't think I have done anything outrageous, otherwise he wouldn't hate you." "It's me." "Why do you say he hates me?" Sunangzio denied stiffly. "As soon as he heard the news about me, he immediately rushed to Taiwan from southern Hunan. He took hostages and broke into Zhu's house to see me. When he saw me, even though I already look old, he came to kiss me." After saying that, a shy blush appeared on Sunangzio's tender and delicious cheeks, and she looked at Qin Yinan with a hint of pride. "He has never kissed you like this." What he saw was not you at all. Qin Yinan was very disgusted by the shyness on Sunangzio's face. It was so shameless. She was so young to interpret the innocence of a girl. Although Lu Chang'an did not tell her in detail about his visit to Zhu's house, Qin Yinan himself was able to analyze that it was Suzayakuai that Lu Chang'an saw. Even if they met in ancient times and remembered the past, it was Suzayakuai who kissed him. The feeling of kissing has nothing to do with love. What does that matter? When he kissed me, he just thought it was me. In other words, at least this affection is still for me, so what difference does it make, Sunangzio said nonchalantly, and then sneered, you. No matter how hard you try, he only treats you as his sister. When did I have such deliberate intentions? Chinyanan pressed her chest. She suddenly realized that Sunangzio was actually much more hateful than An Nuan. At least An Nuan would not be so slanderous and insult people's innocence out of thin air. Her chest heaved, and she quickly grabbed the clothes on both sides of the buttons, feeling like she was about to be exploded by Sunan's beauty. Chinyanan felt her blood surge up, and her whole cheek was filled with blood. Her jade-white skin was filled with the color of rouge, and she pressed her chest tightly with her palms. This Sunangzio must be spitting blood. Absolutely impossible. Chinyanan's impression of Yesijan, even in Lu Chang'an's dictation, was that she was as quiet and elegant as the lilacs in the alley. How could she look like Sunangzio's slander? You just rely on my inability to remember what happened in the past, and your slander, to be able to confront him face to face, Chinyanan said angrily. How can you say such shameless things to your face? You can ask yourself. Sunangzio twisted her body and raised the newspaper in front of herself and Chinyanan without any interest. Chinyanan felt dizzy and leaned on the seat to calm down her breath. Even though her physical fitness was different from ordinary people, even sharp blades could not hurt her face, but this did not mean that she was shameless. It's not shameless. After a while, Chinyanan raised her hands to cover her eyes. After her breath calmed down, she bit her lips and asked, why are you targeting me like this? That was all 100 years ago, and now his girlfriend, that's not me. Chinyanan felt that if she was just jealous, she would be targeting the wrong person. If it was resentment, how many years had it been? What's more, if she hadn't been drugged, what would have happened next? This person is really unreasonable to the extreme. That little girl is just an ordinary person. Even with his help, she will inevitably lose her beauty after decades. But you are different. You can actually have an unprecedented functional state like rebirth. Of course, I am particularly embarrassed. Sunangzio took it for granted. He said, didn't you realize, in fact, he can only slow down the aging of people, but it cannot make people live forever. In other words, he has not yet explored enough of his potential. Chinyanan opened his mouth slightly. Aging is always a heavy topic. Even he can't do anything about it. He is immortal, but he sees the people around him aging over time. Over the years, he must have been able to calm down. Yes, but as a person who can't understand this kind of mood, Chinyanan still feels sorry for him who has experienced this kind of thing countless times. How do you know that it can only delay aging, but it can't make people live forever? Am I not a living example? Chinyanan didn't want Sunangzio to be rampant. You are a special case, an extremely rare special case. Just being reborn does not mean you will live forever. Maybe you can live 100, 200 years longer than ordinary people. In short, you are better than ordinary people. That An Nuan is much more of an eyesore. Sunangzio put down the newspaper and stared at Chinyanan. Are you sure that you will live forever? Chinyanan sneered. Sunangzio smiled slightly and said nothing. Chinyanan thought for a while, stopped sneering, and turned her head calmly. She was sure that Sunangzio did not know the abilities of Shangguan Dandan and the coffin. I understand. Why don't you think An Nuan is a problem? After Chinyanan calmed down, his mind became much clearer. You think Lu Chang'an doesn't have the ability to keep An Nuan young, but you do have this ability. Do you think that one day Lu Chang'an will come to you for help and bow to you for An Nuan sooner or later, and at this time you can use this to negotiate terms? It can be said that An Nuan is of very important use value to you, and because I don't have this kind of use value, because if Lu Chang'an likes me, he doesn't need to ask you for help at all, and you will be even less valuable to him. Sunangzio looked at Chinyanan coldly. As expected, this little foxy girl had always been good at doing things that ruined her, and was especially annoying. You are wrong, he has more solutions than you think. Qin Yinan was full of confidence in his brother. He may have failed many times before, but I believe he can think of a solution now and doesn't need you. Qin Yinan can also be sure that Sunangxiu knows no more secrets about her brother than she does. For example, the prehistoric beast-like transformation was a secret that her brother presented to her alone. Feeling a little proud, Qin Yinan closed her eyes and ignored Sunangxiu. Sunangxiu's eyes trembled and she stared at Qin Yinan suspiciously. Did Lu Chang'an tell Qin Yinan some secret that she didn't know? I recommend a new book, The Asylum of All Realms, written by Fei Guo. It is a masterpiece as soon as it is released. The rhythm of the story is ups and downs in an orderly manner. The author has a good grasp of the plot. The plot has a clear progression and it seems that you will not be able to put it down. Asking for a monthly ticket. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 446. After arriving at the station, Sunangxiu invited Qin Yinan to get on the bus. Both parties had the same destination. Qin Yinan hesitated for a moment, then asked the pickup driver to follow Sunangxiu's car, and agreed to Sunangxiu's invitation. She felt that Sunangxiu wanted to talk to her before meeting Qin Peng. Nowadays, Sunangxiu seems to be really low-key. The person who came to pick her up was just a common and low-key Maybach S680, and the fleet only had 3 cars. Even with Qin Yinan's height, he can stretch out comfortably after sitting down. Sunangxiu's butt was next to the edge of the seat. She stretched her legs, tried hard to kick the footrest in front of her with her toes, then sat back and looked at Qin Yinan beside her casually. She could actually have a figure like Qin Yinan's, but she preferred her own appearance when she was a child, the way she looked when she first met him. Just tell me if you have anything to say. If you don't speak, staying alone with Sunangxiu is undoubtedly unnecessary and uncomfortable. Qin Yinan turned his head to meet Sunangxiu's eyes. Sunangxiu looked at her faint smile in the car window. Aren't you curious about how I changed my appearance and figure? Why do you think I'm curious? Qin Yinan was actually a little confused, because she didn't even know how she was reborn, and she didn't become as indifferent as she did after learning the truth. She just didn't want to show it in front of Sunangxiu. Whether it's you or I am the same as before, with some differences. You can guess that I can use an Nuan, then you should be able to guess that I can also use others. He cares about very few people in this world, but after all, there is someone who can make him compromise. Sunangxiu stretched out his hand. Come, look at your slender and tender fingers with great satisfaction. She would always be immersed in memories inadvertently, and she would always look like this in her memories. It was best for memories and time to stay in the best days. This is why you went to see the old man. Qin Yinan sneered. There is no doubt that Sunangxiu meant that since she could threaten Lu Chang'an by using an Nuan's old age and beauty, she could also use it to improve Qin Peng's body and extend his life. The conditions required Lu Chang'an to make certain compromises. Sunangxiu frowned slightly, and there was a pride in Qin Yinan's eyes that was difficult for Sunangxiu to understand, and even a contempt with a strong sense of superiority, as if Sunangxiu had said something childish and stupid. My old man always told me that my wife has been waiting for him for a long time. If she gets impatient and drinks mangpo soup, he will not be able to find her. But I still have unfulfilled wishes. I asked him what his wish was. He didn't say anything, he just looked at me with a smile. Qin Yinan recalled the wrinkled and kind smile on the white-haired Qin Peng's face. Of course I understand now, he wants to see Lu Chang'an and I are together. This is also the reason why he sent me to Junxia and asked me to stay in Junxia. He even couldn't wait to arrange a marriage. What a bad old man. Although Sunangxiu had already known about Qin Peng's arrangement, she was still furious at this moment. Didn't Qin Peng know who was his fiancée back then? That sister-in-law is called diligent. If she hadn't heard Qin Peng's sweet words, the sister-in-law on the left and the sister-in-law on the right made her extremely satisfied. How could she have allocated so much money to Qin Peng to carry out revolution? How could the old man be threatened by you in this way? Don't think that everyone in this world is like you, with selfish desires that exceed the sky. Qin Yanan looked at Sunangziu disdainfully. We'll see. Sunangziu calmed down and looked at her tender fingers as white as green onions. She wanted to weigh whether Qin Yanan's pride for Qin Peng could withstand the test of life and death. If you don't want to talk too much, stop the car. Qin Yanan returned to the car that picked her up. She had long thought that it was impossible to go all the way with Sunangziu. Qin Yanan also understood the horror of Sunangziu. In fact, there were very few people in the world who could not be tempted by her. Even Qin Yanan, at this time, very much hoped that Qin Peng could become as young as herself. She also longing for some mysterious ability or unknown life technology in Sunangziu's hands. How did she do it? Qin Yanan did not believe that Sunangziu had obtained the godlike ability by herself. There must be others behind Sunangziu. Qin Yanan will not easily believe that Sunangziu can really rejuvenate people casually, or that this requires paying an extremely huge price, or even just a scam. Suzuki, as the person Sunangziu trusts the most, is still very cautious now. Looks old. Thinking like this, Qin Yanan became more and more suspicious. After returning, this matter should be discussed carefully with Lu Chang'an. It is impossible for him to know everything. He may even have a lot of clues, but due to his temperament, he is not eager to explore it to the end. By this time Lu Chang'an had already made the ice cream mooncakes. Inspired by water melody song 2, When Will the Bright Moon Come, Lu Chang'an did not stick to the artistic conception of the poem in the pattern of the ice cream, and made some patterns such as the Jade Rabbit, the Bright Moon, the Zujkihu Tower, etc., but made the 9 mooncakes. The pattern can piece together a simple Song dynasty genre painting, which also reflects the name of Xining 9th year 1076. But this was all for the blind man to see. When Lu Chang'an came upstairs with frozen ice cream mooncakes in the evening, Zhou Dongdong was shouting "Wow wow 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 wow" towards the electric fan. What is she doing? Lu Chang'an hid the ice cream behind his back and asked Zhou Shuling, who was wearing a bib and seemed a little nervous. She discovered today that her voice changes when she talks and sings to an electric fan, so she has been playing with it for a long time. Zhou Shuling smiled sheepishly. I also tried it, and it was quite interesting. It's a good thing that the childlike innocence is still intact. Lu Chang'an nodded in praise. You didn't say I was stupid for doing this. Zhou Shuling felt a little surprised. Look, you are so self-aware, how could I call you stupid? I hate it. Zhou Shuling gave Lu Chang'an a slap and pursed her lips. I made mooncakes. You try them later. I did it too. Lu Chang'an took out his mooncake. Zhou Shuling glanced at it, then took a few steps back in embarrassment. She pointed at Lu Chang'an, slightly annoyed. This man had obviously seen her studying making mooncakes these past few days, but he didn't say a word, waiting for her to finish it. Only then did he take out what he made. How can I get the mooncakes that people put so much effort into making? I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 447. Perhaps it was some kind of innate superpower, or excellent intuition and keen sense of smell. Zhou Dongdong suddenly felt an inexplicable force that stopped her from continuing to move towards the electric fan. Wow 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 wow. Yelling, he turned his head and saw the plate held in Brother Chang'an's hand. Brother Chang'an, Mom made meat buns and said she would wait for you to come and eat them together. Zhou Dongdong bit his fingers and stared intently at the plate held in Brother Chang'an's hand. Although the plate was raised a bit high, Zhou Dongdong can't quite tell what's inside. Meat buns. Lu Chang'an looked at Zhou Shuling doubtfully. Mooncake. Zhou Shuling finished speaking hesitantly and stared at her child angrily. Who told her it was a meat bun? They all said mooncakes. Zhou Shuling is not going to give her mooncakes to these two annoying guys, one big and one small. She keeps it for herself for breakfast and supper. She can eat it for at least a week. A kind of meat bun called mooncake, right? Lu Chang'an and Zhou Dongdong were as clever as they discovered the true identity of this mooncake. I won't let you eat anyway. Zhou Shuling took off her apron, sat down on the sofa and looked at the plate in Lu Chang'an's hand. Lu Chang'an sat next to him and placed his ice cream mooncake on the brown wooden table in front of the sofa. I want to eat. Zhou Dongdong leaned between Lu Chang'an's legs, patted his knees and jumped up and down. You need to bring a plate to eat this, Lu Chang'an said. Although she didn't plan to give Lu Chang'an and Zhou Dongdong the mooncakes they made, Zhou Shuling still went to get a plate and a plastic knife and fork. When I celebrated my birthday before, I bought a small cake, and I gave a lot of these disposable paper plates and knives and forks. Zhou Shuling has always been diligent and thrifty at home, and she always feels that useful things will not be thrown away casually. Call me next time. What? Birthday? Oh, Zhou Shuling rubbed her hands and looked expectantly as Lu Chang'an took out 3 knives, forks, and paper plates. Every taste is different. Everyone can only choose one to eat, Lu Chang'an said to Zhou Dongdong. Then give me a small bite of both you and Mom's, okay? Zhou Dongdong pinched his fingers to indicate the size of the small bite, hesitated for a moment, and exposed the entire fingertip to indicate the small bite. There are actually so many servings. Lu Chang'an didn't say anything. He used a knife to cut a little bit of each mooncake and fed it to Zhou Dongdong. Zhou Shuling became a little anxious and said, "Such a beautiful mooncake, don't scratch it and break it." After all, women love beauty by nature, and it hurts to see Lu Chang'an chop each top of such a beautiful mooncake. Mooncakes are for eating. No matter how beautiful the mooncake is, it has to be bitten into pieces, Lu Chang'an said without hesitation. No, we can't eat them all in one day. I'll put them away first. Zhou Shuling picked out Lu Chang'an's scratched and disfigured 3-month cake, picked up the remaining mooncakes on the plate, and walked out the door, ready to help Lu Chang'an put it away. Come back, it's all for you to eat. Lu Chang'an waved. I don't like this. Then you made so many, Zhou Shuling scolded with some embarrassment, and then under Zhou Dongdong's gaze, she covered the remaining mooncakes with a layer of plastic wrap and put them in the freezer. I made so many flavors just to make her not know which one to eat and roll on the ground in anxiety, do you understand? It will ruin my plan. Lu Chang'an pointed to the sofa and motioned for Zhou Shuling to sit down and eat the mooncakes, with some said dissatisfiedly. Zhou Dongdong didn't pay attention. She was eating her own mooncakes and looking at the mooncakes on the plates of Brother Chang'an and her mother from time to time. It's so annoying. It's stupid to bully her. Zhou Shuling's eyes were soft. It had been a long time since we had eaten mooncakes together. The bright moon outside the window seemed to be particularly bright tonight. Where are the mooncakes you made? Ah! Take it out, you've done it, why are you hiding it? Then you are not allowed to talk about me. Lu Chang'an smiled. It seemed that he usually hit her a lot, and she really cared about it. Zhou Shuling was busy in the kitchen for a few minutes and took out the mooncakes she had made. Lu Chang'an looked at them and saw that there were 20 or 30 mooncakes piled on a large plate. She must have warmed them in the microwave just now, and all of them were in vain. It is plump, exuding swelling heat, and has a delicate and soft white skin. It looks more like a freshly baked steamed bun. There is a slightly concave gap in the middle, with rich gravy flowing out. It looks pretty good. Isn't this just meat buns? Lu Chang'an smelled the aroma of meat. He was not mocking, but felt a little difficult to understand. I see that you are also a traditional woman. Why do you always like to be unconventional when it comes to making food? Zhou Shuling was quite willing to accept the label of traditional woman, and did not listen to Lu Chang'an's sarcasm, so she showed off her making experience in a somewhat timid manner. There are also mooncakes stuffed with meat. The meat here, they are all cooked with large bone broth, then mince the meat, boil it in the bone broth, let the meat filling absorb all the soup, then wrap it with lobster and shrimp, use bun wrappers, no, use mooncakes. On the bag. Are there any mooncakes that need to be heated in a microwave? Lu Chang'an continued to question. Well, it's not that the meat is cold and the soup has solidified. It doesn't taste good. It needs to be heated up, Zhou Shuling explained. It's true, it's just a meat bun. Lu Chang'an waved his hand, indicating that she didn't need to quibble anymore. Zhou Shuling could only watch him stuffing a mooncake into his mouth. Although she didn't expect him to appreciate it, Zhou Shuling couldn't help but look at his expression expectantly. Lu Chang'an didn't say anything. After finishing one, he glanced at Zhou Shuling in surprise, then picked up the second one and started eating it. Zhou Shuling couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Well, the menu is ready. Lu Chang'an nodded. This dish is called Mama Zhou's brand meat buns. Zhou Shuling almost cried with joy. She excitedly grabbed Lu Chang'an's arm and shook it several times. She looked at Lu Chang'an in disbelief. Really? 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 Eat your mooncake. Lu Chang'an reached out and pushed Zhou Shuling's face away. He was eating, and the saliva sprayed on his buns. Zhou Shuling sat back happily. She was finally on an equal footing with Zhou Dongdong on the menu. She was about to eat when she saw that Zhou Dongdong had already finished eating the ice cream mooncakes. She held a knife in her little hand and reached out uncontrollably to cut Zhou Shuling's mooncakes. And quickly slapped Zhou Dongdong on the back of his hand. My hand is moving on its own, Zhou Dongdong said in disbelief. What's going on? Give you half. Lu Chang'an cut half of his ice cream mooncake and gave it to Zhou Dongdong. From now on, you and your mother can only eat one piece of the rest every day. I'll give the rest to her. Although this ice cream mooncake is extremely delicious, Zhou Shuling is a mother. Zhou Shuling didn't know if it was because of Lu Chang'an's approval that she felt extremely happy. She felt like she was eating delicacies from the gods. I made mooncakes for you, but you still won't eat them. I know, Zhou Shuling said obediently. Lu Chang'an finished the remaining half of his ice cream mooncake, ate 10 more meat buns, and took one downstairs. Lu Chang'an thought that even he thought the meat buns were delicious, so he tried to seduce Shang Guandandan to see what effect it had. After all, he had never seen Shang Guandandan eat before. Just like in biological research, there are often projects to observe the eating of experimental subjects. Shang Guan Lu Chang'an was naturally very interested in this phenomenon that was obviously different from ordinary people. Just as he walked downstairs, Lu Chang'an knocked on the door and looked up to see a group of black shadows whizzing past in the distant sky. Looking intently, he saw densely packed large bats. Lu Chang'an stared at the direction in which the bats disappeared while continuing to knock on the door hard. Asking for monthly ticket recommendations. A special note on updates. Many authors make money as long as they have subscriptions. Sometimes they don't update for a day or two. They rely on old books or new subscriptions every day, which has little impact on their income. However, the contract signed by Xiahua is different. Money is calculated based on the number of words. If you don't update for a day, you will get zero income. Xiahua usually updates without any health reasons. Who can't get along with money? Xiahua did not let her daily income go unearned just because of her lazy capital. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 448. The door opened a thin crack, revealing Shang Guandandan's eyes, which were moving up and down. She tilted her head and stared at Lu Chang'an from inside the door. Want to eat mooncakes? Lu Chang'an handed the meat buns to Shang Guandandan. Shang Guandandan stretched out his little hand from the crack in the door, grabbed the meat bun, then brought it to his mouth and bit it in small bites. Lu Chang'an looked at Shang Guandandan in surprise. She just picked it up and ate it? There is absolutely no difference from ordinary people, and there is no sense of observation at all. This is a meat bun Shang Guandandan ate in small bites, but the speed of eating was very fast. Under Lu Chang'an's gaze, a big bun disappeared into her small mouth, which seemed to be struggling to hold a thumb in the mouth. Can you eat like a normal person? Lu Chang'an found it a bit boring. It would be interesting if Shang Guandandan showed strange phenomena. For example, in a story, the dead man who came back from hell was named Zhou. He would vomit after eating food from living people. Some zombies will be disgusted if they eat roasted brains, and some vampires will have a weakened ability to recover from wounds if they buy blood packs containing viruses, and so on. Is there any more? Shang Guandandan stretched out his palm. Zhou Dongdong has some at home, I'll bring some to you tomorrow. Lu Chang'an is not a stingy person, I thought you just need to absorb vitality and blood or something. Shang Guandandan didn't notice that Lu Chang'an was lying, but he didn't give Lu Chang'an any useful information. I am a normal person. Do you have any misunderstandings about normal people? People like me are normal people. Lu Chang'an pointed at himself. For people like you, we normal people call you otakus. Shang Guandandan was unhappy and closed the door directly. Lu Chang'an raised his head and saw that the black shadows transformed by the group of bats had flown a long distance away. Although it was impossible to determine whether this group of bats was related to Mrs. Karnstein, Lu Chang'an still decided to take a look. After all, this kind of scene is really uncommon, especially in the sky above the city. So Lu Chang'an sped up his running speed, leaped through the low old alleys and streets, passed through several gradually rising high-rise buildings, and finally landed on the roof of Bailong Center. Taking advantage of the height here, in the bright moonlight, you can see the bats flying towards the river. Bayou! 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 Several jets of water hit Lu Chang'an's back. Lu Chang'an turned his head expressionlessly and saw Zhu Huntang hiding in the swimming pool, shooting at Lu Chang'an with a water gun. The bright moon is high, the world is picturesque, life is so beautiful, why don't you miss her at all? You just want to die. Lu Chang'an looked at Zhu Huntang incomprehensibly, and walked towards the swimming pool step by step. I just wanted to say hello to you. Zhu Huntang quickly threw away the water gun and swam to the center of the swimming pool, although such a distance was of little significance to his own safety. The way you greet me like this must be because your little skirt and socks don't want to live anymore. No. No. They are innocent and lively, and they want to live for a long time. Lu Chang'an turned his head and glanced at the bright moon behind him and the rivers and mountains under the moon. He stopped wasting time with Zhu Huntang and asked, "Can a helicopter take off in such weather conditions at night?" Hearing that Lu Chang'an changed the subject and stopped talking about her skirt and socks, Zhu Huntang breathed a sigh of relief and nodded vigorously, "I know it's definitely okay to take off. But there's no way to land casually." "Then it's no problem. Send me a helicopter." Lu Chang'an pointed in a direction, "I want to chase a group of bats." "I want to go." Zhu Huntang climbed out of the swimming pool excitedly. Qin Yan'an had already gone back to see Qin Peng. Originally, he had agreed to take her with him last month, but Qin Yan'an suddenly changed his mind when the matter came to pass. Zhu Huntang also wanted to spend the Mid-Autumn Festival with his cousin to express his closeness, but it turned out that his cousin also planned to go back to his hometown, so Zhu Huntang was very bored, so he had to eat mooncakes and play with water guns in the swimming pool to admire the moon. Now the most interesting Lu Chang'an has appeared, and his affairs as always, Zhu Huntang wants to actively participate. Most of Zhu Huntang's swimsuits are in cute styles, but the one she is wearing now has some exceptions. She didn't react until she was halfway up, and found Lu Chang'an looking at him calmly, his cheeks slightly red. "Turn around." "Nothing to see." Lu Chang'an nodded to show that he was not nostalgic and commented objectively. Zhu Huntang was a little angry, so he picked up the water gun and shot Lu Chang'an a few times. He was sure that he was very valuable now. He had no time to hurt his skirt and socks, so he hurriedly changed clothes. Zhu Huntang didn't take long this time, because she just wiped herself, without even arranging her hair, changed into a pair of underwear, put on a simple white dress, ran out, and boarded the helicopter with Lu Chang'an. What are you going to do? In order to allow the pilot to adapt to the night vision requirements of night flying as quickly as possible, the environment in the cabin was not bright. Zhu Huntang consciously lowered his voice, maintaining the feeling of participating in a mysterious mission. I said I was going to chase a group of bats. Their direction should be out of the city, but tonight is the Mid-Autumn Festival, and people everywhere are looking up at the sky. If I jump around in the sky, too many people will see me, so I will just use your helicopter, Lu Chang'an explained, and then asked, have you prepared a parachute? This is a multi-engine configuration, not a cheap helicopter that relies on auto-rotation to land if one engine breaks down, Zhu Huntang said proudly. Is this what I'm asking? If I want to jump, I have to carry a parachute to show off, otherwise I will kill these two pilots and silence them. Lu Chang'an pulled Zhu Huntang over and said in her ear, of course he is not. I was afraid that helicopters would be prone to accidents when flying at night, and I was carrying the parachute on my back. What's more, if the helicopter were to have an accident, it would definitely not be possible to escape with a parachute. I want to jump down too. Zhu Huntang's ears were itchy and he was very excited. Up to you. Then you have to hold me and jump down, Zhu Huntang muttered, just like holding Yaya. I'm not an idiot. If you mean to let me jump by myself, then I will definitely fall badly. Did she also tell you about this? There is no way for a woman not to tell someone about the romance she has experienced. If you don't take me there, I won't lend you a plane next time. Romantic? I'll scare you to death later, Lu Chang'an thought for a moment and mentioned Zhu Huntang casually. It was much lighter than Qinyanan. It seemed that even if he traveled a long distance, he wouldn't be delayed much. He is a reasonable person, and since he wants something from someone, there is nothing wrong with giving her a unique experience in return. You think I'm a chicken? Zhu Huntang felt a little insulted. She knew that Lu Chang'an was weighing her, just like he was pulling the wings of a chicken to weigh it in the market. Zhu Huntang had a very unforgettable experience. Once she and Qinyanan went to the vegetable market. Although she stood more than 20 meters outside the vegetable market, she still felt that the place was full of the smell of all kinds of livestock. Qinyanan was still at the door. In the chicken pen of the stall, I caught the chickens with my bare hands without wearing any gloves. From then on, she never followed Qinyanan to buy groceries. Tell the pilot to keep this direction, fly to the Lushan mountain, and keep the altitude within 500 meters of the ground. We will jump off and let them return home on their own. When Zhu Huntang heard the word we and knew that Lu Chang'an had really agreed, he immediately became obedient and followed the instructions obediently. The highest altitude of Lushan mountain is only 300.8 meters. The helicopter flew high and hovered over Lushan mountain. Lu Chang'an jumped out holding Zhu Huntang in his arms. Zhu Huntang originally just stood beside him, thinking that he would at least say, "Are you ready? Come over and jump down." Zhu Huntang was not mentally prepared at all. Just when she wanted to scream, the strong airflow prevented her from making any sound. She could only bite her lips tightly and wrap around Lu Chang'an tightly like an octopus, bursting out. The strength that a fairy in her normal state could not possess was just like the desperate effort of a dying struggle. Even when she landed, Lu Chang'an's casual pull did not pull her off her body. Is it romantic? Lu Chang'an had no choice but to remind Zhu Huntang that he had landed. Zhu Huntang came back to his senses in a daze, but at this time his limbs were weak. He finally let go of Lu Chang'an, staggered a few steps, held onto a small tree, pressed his chest and wanted to vomit, but in the end he failed. Nothing came out. You did it on purpose," Zhu Huntang panted and stared at Lu Chang'an. It was not what Qinyanan said at all, and it was not fun at all. Lu Chang'an raised his head and could just see the shadows of the bats in the sky covered by trees.
He was able to catch up after a while, so he sat down and started to knead his legs. "What's wrong with you?" Zhu Huntang was a little surprised, because she knew that such an action was unusual for a Superman like Lu Chang'an. "The height is too high. When I jumped down, my legs absorbed too much impact and were a little sore." Lu Chang'an was fine, and there was no problem if he continued running, but he had never been an impatient person. "Sit down and take a rest without delaying your work." "We really jumped out of the helicopter." Zhu Huntang knelt down next to Lu Chang'an and rested. It seemed that he had just come back to his senses and looked up at the returning helicopter in the sky in disbelief. Lu Chang'an said nothing and glanced at Zhu Huntang. Zhu Huntang tilted his head, as if he didn't know what his expression should be at this time. He raised his little fist and started to hit Lu Chang'an's calf. After smashing it for a while, Lu Chang'an pushed her hands away, and Zhu Huntang smashed it a few more times, finally regaining some of his mood to participate in the mysterious mission and showing some excitement. "Why are we chasing bats? Bats are not common in cities, let alone bats in groups. I have seen groups of bats several times recently, and today I have to get to the bottom of it," Lu Chang'an explained. "Maybe it is related to some kind of vampire." "There really are vampires." Zhu Huntang pulled her white skirt between her legs and squatted down again. "Then our operation is called Night Interview with Vampires." Lu Chang'an didn't care what the action was called. He just thought of Europe hundreds of years ago and the movie he and Nuan watched together. "Please recommend monthly tickets." "I recommend a friend's book, Mythical Native Species." "Is the end of science the end of myth? When humans are already like gods, does that mean we have explored the end of the universe?" "Humans are already like gods, but myths will never end." "I'm really immortal." Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 449. Zhu Huntang's massage method of beating Lu Chang'an's calf had no effect, but he still stood up quickly. The bat didn't get gray quickly, but it was better to follow up at night. After all, he was still thinking about having meat buns to eat in the morning. This is not the top of Lushan Mountain, but rather close to the valley where Lu Chang'an and Qin Yanan visited. The night breeze blows, the bright moon hangs high in the sky, and the lake at the end of the valley is slightly rippled, just like the gauze condensed by the moonlight dancing in the hands of the goddess. Seeing Lu Chang'an stand up, Zhu Huntang still squatted and reached out to touch Lu Chang'an's calf. "Are you okay?" Zhu Huntang looked around and saw that he and Lu Chang'an were standing in a concave surface. It was probably an inaccessible forest land, and the thick surface layer of dead leaves and rots that had accumulated was dispersed by the strong airflow. The shadows of the trees slanted in the moonlight like the outlines of forest trees drawn by primary school students' pencils. Zhu Huntang looked at Lu Chang'an's profile looking up at the sky. She suddenly felt that she was a little crazy. Following a dangerous person like Lu Chang'an into such an inaccessible wilderness, if he suddenly went crazy, what should you do if you are raped? That would really make the sky and the earth not work. It's quite exciting to think about it. Of course, this kind of stimulation does not mean that Zhu Huntang really wants this kind of thing to happen, but it is just fun to think about it. Just like many people like to watch horror movies, but few people really want to see ghosts. The possibility of him forcing himself to be safe is basically zero, but the possibility of leaving him in this barren mountain is quite high. Zhu Huntang took Lu Chang'an's arm and held him tightly. Lu Chang'an didn't care, she was not Qin Yanan. "The bat is gray," Zhu Huntang reminded Lu Chang'an a little loudly while thinking wildly. Lu Chang'an casually picked up Zhu Huntang and hugged him. He jumped in 3 or 2 steps and stood up from the ground. He rushed into the moonlight that was scattered in the sky. Looking up, the moon seemed to rush into his eyes. Zhu Huntang screamed, clenching his hands into fists, nervously pressing them against his chest, his big eyes looking around. Lu Chang'an always soars into the sky like a cannonball, and then shoots into the ground quickly. He outlines a parabola in the space around the city, and soon crosses the Mizi Lake area, chasing the bats right in front of him. Group. He also had to slow down to let this apparently unnatural migration of bats continue to lead the way. Zhu Huntang gradually adapted to it. The ups and downs were more severe than the most ferocious roller coaster in the world, but Lu Chang'an held her calmly, giving her a sense of comfort as if she was rippling with the water in a swimming pool. There is a feeling of walking on the moon and becoming an immortal. Zhu Huntang loosened her clenched fists and stretched out her hands to explore, as if she wanted to touch the edge of the moon. It was a pity that she was wearing a simple white dress. Does not have a very strong fairy spirit, which makes her feel that the feeling of becoming a fairy is not very sufficient. I am an immortal, and you are the immortal's fat sheep, or fairy sheep for short. The fairy sheep and Chang'e's jade rabbit are the same type of mounts, do you understand? It's also the moon. Only Chang'e can walk on the moon. Other immortals can't walk on the moon because Chang'e is a widow, and other immortals who step on the moon are just causing trouble in front of the widow's door. What's more, it's a fairy sheep. Even if you want to eat grass, the jade rabbit can't give it to you. Zhu Huntang was stunned. Lu Chang'an's nonsense made people complain at every point. There were so many flaws that people didn't know what to say. Why is Chang'e a widow? Her husband is Ho Yi. Do you think I am illiterate? Zhu Huntang said unconvinced. After all, she also wanted to be a fairy like Chang'e, who had peaceful years and was full of elegance, tranquility, and sad temperament. Ho Yi is one of the ancestral witches of mankind. Like Quafu, Gong Gong, Chi Yu, Nuwa and other ancestral witches, he fell in the three realms war. Lu Chang'an said with great regret. How do you know? Zhu Huntang has never heard of this kind of story. She occasionally reads novels on the Kitty and Boys channel, but not many. She has never seen anything of this type. I'm an immortal. If the male protagonist is based on me, can't he write some memories about grabbing Ho Yi with his bare hands and shooting Japanese arrows, and pressing the foreman with his hands to enhance the style? Lu Chang'an looked at the people in front of him who were walking leisurely. The bat group had plenty of time to chat with Zhu Huntang. Then, why is the jade rabbit a mount? It is obviously a cute little rabbit, and it was held in Chang'e's arms. Zhu Huntang felt that if the rabbit was used as a mount, then the big rabbit would not be cute, and the small animal to be cute, it must be small to be cute. Because jade rabbit does not mean that it is a jade-colored rabbit, but a rabbit made of jade. It was originally a flying rabbit made by Lubin. It is naturally a mount. After it became Chang'e's mount, it learned to eat grass. You're just a fairy sheep, so don't argue with me anymore. I am a fairy, Zhu Huntang resisted resolutely. Although the fairy sheep also carries the word fairy, who wants to be a mount? Zhu Huntang suddenly became proud. Obviously you are my mount now, flying with me. Lu Chang'an glanced at her, and after landing on the ground, he jumped, holding Zhu Huntang's face toward the ground between his legs, riding on her lower back, borrowing the power of the jump, as if riding a horse. Zhu Huntang flew in the sky, making Zhu Huntang scream in surprise. Who is the mount? Me. Me. It's my fairy sheep, Zhu Huntang hurriedly admitted. That's about it? Lu Chang'an lifted her up from his crotch, and instead of holding her, he held her under his arm. This was a treatment that Zhou Dongdong liked to enjoy, so she must have no objection. Zhu Huntang didn't dare to dance, which angered Lu Chang'an. As soon as he let go, didn't he fall to the ground? It would definitely not look good if he fell. Zhu Huntang was a little afraid of death, but he was especially afraid of a bad death. The bats swarmed into the Elephant Trunk Nest National Forest Park ahead, and Lu Chang'an and Zhu Huntang also stopped. Putting Zhu Huntang on the ground casually, Lu Chang'an stared at the messy and dilapidated demolition and reconstruction traces in his memory. There used to be a Dragon King temple on the top of the mountain in Elephant Trunk Nest. During every sacrifice, local villagers put their livestock at the foot of the mountain. These livestock will walk to the Dragon King Temple on the top of the mountain by themselves. After liberation, the Dragon King Temple was demolished, but the livestock no longer walked up the mountain on their own. Obviously, it was difficult for the cows, ghosts, and snake gods to gather their energy after the founding of the People's Republic of China, and the Dragon King also defeated in the vast sea of People's War. I'll go to the mountain to have a look. You wait for me here, Lu Chang'an said to Zhu Huntang. No. No. I feel so cold, as if something is going to eat me. Zhu Huntang immediately stood up and squeezed into Lu Chang'an's arms, showing a scared look. But when he came into Lu Chang'an's arms, the feeling that something was treating him as a delicacy, drooling and staring at him with a fierce look, disappeared. Lu Chang'an frowned slightly, felt carefully, and then vaguely felt a desire to covet his vitality and blood, but he seemed to be trying his best to restrain it and wanted to hide it. How can there be such a useless mount like you? Lu Chang'an sighed, and had no choice but to take Zhu Huntang to the top of the mountain, which seemed to be the source of that desire. There was no road in the mountains, and Lu Chang'an didn't need a road. He reached the top of the mountain in a few leaps. There were only ruins of the Dragon King Temple that had its roof ripped off, but a small brick temple was built next to it. Lu Chang'an felt that the desire for blood came from the small temple. The strange thing is that this desire in the small temple is obviously restrained and trying its best to hide this desire, which shows that it is afraid of being discovered by Lu Chang'an, but it does not avoid it. Lu Chang'an walked to the door of the small temple. Under the eaves above the temple door, densely packed bats were hanging upside down. They were raising their wings to cover their bodies and seemed to be in a state of rest and slumber. There's a coffin inside. Lu Chang'an put down Zhu Huntang. Zhu Huntang held Lu Chang'an's arm tightly and pointed tremblingly at the temple door. The moonlight shone slantly in. Among the messy bricks and wood, tables, and weeds, a dusty coffin was placed. Leave it there quietly. Push, month, give, don't give, it's all fine. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 450. Chapter 450. For details, please see the pinned post in the book review area. Click on the blue font in the author's remarks of this chapter to enter directly. I'm Really Immortal Annual Book Review Event. Event time, from now until March 15, 2019. Event location, I'm Really Immortal Kidian Book Review Area. Activity requirements, the fan value of I'm Really Immortal is greater than or equal to The Apprentice, otherwise it will be invalid. I'm Really Immortal the third book review area, annual, book review contest. As follows. Time flies, and it is also the year of the pig. It has been almost a year since summer flowers returned. During this year, although Xiahua sometimes did not update for a day or two due to physical discomfort, frail and sickly, the total updates divided by the number of update days, the average daily update volume was also 4,000 words. Xiahua's update, not to say it's very good, is just okay. P.S. If the immortal eunuch becomes the eunuch, I will live broadcast the handstand duster. Closer to home, since it is an anniversary event, let's relax the restrictions. This event can be done freely, regardless of style. However, the entry must be written anniversary event essay contest entry at the beginning, otherwise it will be invalid. The rewards for this event are as follows. First place, rewarded with an 18K gold necklace from Chow Tai Fook. Second place, a Swarovski necklace will be awarded. Third place, awarded a pair of AKG Y50BT headphones, worth 599. Fourth place, reward a set of hanfu, about 500 hanfu, you can choose. Fifth place, reward a set of hanfu, also about 500 hanfu, you can choose. Sixth place, starting point coin 10,888. Seventh place, starting currency 8,888. Eighth place,
starting currency 6,888. Ninth place, starting coin 5,888. 10th place, starting currency 3,888. 11th to 15th place, 1088 starting points reward. You can register multiple times for the book review event, but each account can only win once per month. This is not a sign-in post. Please do not sign in to this post. Violators will have their post deleted and banned for more than a week. The final right of interpretation belongs to the official website of I'm Really Immortal. Friendly reminder, in previous events, everyone who participated basically won a prize. By the way, please give me a monthly ticket. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm Really Immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Rusiahua. Chapter 451. Coffins are very common. They are probably the common styles found in coffin shops. Many elderly people may like them when they choose them. The front end is slightly arched and the middle is sunken, which looks like an auspicious ingot shape. The coffin is completely black and is quite old. The paint is mottled, and you can vaguely see that the inside is just fir wood that is commonly used by ordinary people. This kind of coffin is very cheap, and ordinary people in the past and now can easily buy it. It's not catalpa, nor golden nan muo, nor the twigwood on Huanghai Iron Mountain. At the beginning of the century, mainland leaders gave the genealogy of the Song family in Taiwan. The box containing the genealogy was made of golden nan muo. Lu Chang'an patted the coffin and said with some regret, I thought this coffin was more or less it should have some background, but it's not even golden nan muo. It seems that there are probably no funerary objects inside, so it's of little value for investigation. Is this the point? Lu Chang'an walked into the small temple. Zhu Huntang did not dare to leave by himself, let alone stay outside alone, so he had to hold his hand, but he dragged him in and hid behind Lu Chang'an. He stammered from behind, I remember, in Lin Zhenying's film, something quickly opened the lid of the coffin and jumped out, wearing the clothes of a high-ranking official of the Qing dynasty, with a symbol. Aren't you a fairy? Are fairies afraid of zombies or something like that? I am, a fairy sheep now. Lu Chang'an ignored her and looked at the coffin in front of him. The desire for vitality became more and more obvious at this time. After feeling it carefully, he felt that it was different from the bronze coffin he stood in Shangguan before. As if he were just a thirsty traveler in the desert, dying to look at the oasis in the mirage ahead. No matter what kind of longing his eyes revealed, no matter how much his heart needed the water so close at hand, there was no way he could take another step forward. I have the strength to take a step forward. This is a very strong desire and obsession, but it does not have the power to realize it. It is different from Shangguan Dandan's bronze coffin. Shangguan Dandan ate a lot of pullets back then, and he also wanted to eat Lu Chang'an. If Lu Chang'an hadn't managed to feed her the big goose she bought, she would have eaten the whole neighborhood. The coffin in front of her was clearly unable to absorb even a little bit of vitality, and vitality that was so close at hand. An ordinary person like Zhu Huntang, who was defenseless, could feel something staring at her, but in fact she was safe and sound. It was not on the same level as Shangguan Dandan's coffin. Lu Chang'an could even feel that the contents in the coffin were in the final stage of annihilation. I looked back and saw that all the bats hanging upside down under the eaves had spread their wings, and their beady little eyes were staring at Lu Chang'an. You cute little things, are you trying to lure me here to save your master? Lu Chang'an thought for a while and understood, these bats may not be the same as the bats that used to monitor him. There are many intelligent creatures in this world, the only difference is the number of neurons. Just like Lu Chang'an looks at Zhu Huntang, and ordinary people look at Hakushi, they actually have the same mentality. Ordinary people may find it incredible that someone can control a bat,
but in Lu Chang'an's opinion, it is not much different from training other animals. Are there vampires here? Zhu Huntang lowered his voice, feeling as if his heart was about to jump out of his chest, as if someone was beating a drum next to his eardrums. How do I know? I have never seen a vampire. Lu Chang'an was also looking forward to it. Whether it was the things in the coffin driving the bats or the bats seducing Lu Chang'an, this is an interesting thing. Can you beat a vampire? Zhu Huntang asked nervously when he saw Lu Chang'an preparing to lift the coffin lid. How do you know whether you can pass a fight if you haven't fought before? Lu Chang'an often talks nonsense, but nonsense and bragging are two different things. Lu Chang'an believes that practice is the only criterion for testing truth. He will not do this kind of thing that has no experience or confirmation at all. Too confident. What if you release a vampire that we can't defeat, and we become a pair of desperate mandarin ducks later? Or the kind that has been sucked dry of blood? My God, it's a chicken, goose, and bird. Something like that. Zhu Huntang imagined it for a moment, and it was too ugly. She didn't want to die in this way. Even if a fairy like herself died, she should lie on a bamboo raft with flowers piled around her. Looking at the quiet lake water, drifting into the eternal space waiting for resurrection. Having his blood sucked dry and dying like a wax product, Zhu Huntang would rather die than die like this. Yuan Yang, that's a word used to describe a couple. We are at most desperate people and mounts. You have become a sheep. Have you ever eaten a sheep? Lu Chang'an waved his hand. Think about it with your brain. What's going on here? If something has the ability to kill us, can this broken coffin trap it? I would have jumped out and killed you. Also, your combat power is 0, don't put it side by side with me. We are ours. It sounds like you can do it. Order whatever you want. Hearing what Lu Chang'an said, Zhu Huntang breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to care about Lu Chang'an's slanderous remarks that his combat effectiveness was 0. Lu Chang'an opened the coffin. Wow! There was a flapping sound, and the bats under the eaves released their claws, flapped their wings in the air, and flew into the sky in groups. Under the moonlight, in the sky above the forest and around the small temple, there were overwhelming bats. In addition to the bats in the small temple, there seemed to be more bats hiding in the surrounding forests at this time. They all flew out and circled in the sky. The moonlight became brighter and brighter. Zhu Huntang nervously raised his fingers to cover his eyes, leaving only a gap for observation. The coffin boards fell to the ground. The thick dust rolled, making Zhu Huntang cover his mouth involuntarily. The moonlight seemed to shift its angle at this moment, illuminating the scene in the coffin. There were no dead bones in the coffin, no bones left by naturally decayed corpses, no cotton wool or burial objects, and no night owls, weasels or the like. A woman who was obviously not an Oriental race was lying in the coffin. Her face was as white as lime, her facial features were deep, her eye sockets were deeply sunken, and she was surrounded by deathly gray-black. There were faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, and her nose was still high. But the lips are chapped. He's a dead man. Zhu Huntang hugged Lu Chang'an's arm tightly, wishing that he would hold his chest to prevent his heart from exploding. Zhu Huntang shivered, his legs were tightly pressed together, and his teeth were chattering. The sound of ta kept coming out, and she felt like she was about to pee in fear. Lu Chang'an observed that this woman looked to be about 40 years old, and her charm was still there. There was almost no vitality left in her body, and it was still passing away, and it seemed that she would die completely at any time. The bats outside the door seemed to feel this, and became more and more anxious, and the frequency of their wings flapping was disturbing. Lu Chang'an spat in the woman's face. What are you doing? Although Zhu Huntang was just a little scared of such a dead person in such a night and such an environment, and had no idea that the dead were the most important, this behavior of spitting at the dead still made her feel a bit excessive. Abortion. She is about to die, my saliva can save her, Lu Chang'an explained. Zhu Huntang was stunned for a moment. Can saliva save people?
I couldn't help but overcome a trace of fear. Looking at the woman in the coffin, I saw that Lu Chang'an's saliva seemed to have been absorbed. The woman's dry lips had regained some color, no longer like dark charcoal lines, and the lips around her eyes where the black color is also lighter, and even though his face is still as pale as lime, at least he doesn't look like a motionless zombie anymore. When Zhu Huntang saw this scene, he couldn't help but spit a little bit in the woman's face. There was no movement at all. Lu Chang'an looked at Zhu Huntang in confusion. Zhu Huntang was a little embarrassed. Spitting was something that fairies usually didn't do, but wasn't this out of curiosity? Lu Chang'an knew that Zhu Huntang was a curious baby, but he still gave her a slap on the head. You know what? When I saw you, I remembered that in those movies and TV series, there would always be a follower who failed to succeed but failed to succeed. In some cases, sometimes you do something stupid and cause disaster. This is not a big disaster. Zhu Huntang held his head in grievance. Lu Chang'an's beatings always hurt so much. Lu Chang'an stopped paying attention to her and reached out to open the woman's lips. The lips were not soft, like the peel of an orange that had been left for a long time and lost its moisture. He inserted his fingers into her lips and pushed them, but the teeth still separated easily. Pushing her teeth aside, she finally felt a little moisture and softness on her tongue, and there were still signs of life. After all, she is not a real dead person, but is in a stage where her vitality is constantly passing away and she may die at any time. Lu Chang'an's saliva just now can keep her alive for a while. Lu Chang'an is not a saint. Even if the other party needs his help, he will immediately come to the rescue with a benevolent heart. Although he will definitely save people in the end, after all, no matter what, such an unusual life form is more valuable alive than dead. Lu Chang'an took out his hand and opened her eyelids again. There are no normal eyes under the eyelids. The pupils are bright red like blood and are a bit larger than ordinary people. It feels like wearing large diameter contact lenses. The whites around the pupils are covered with black filaments, more like it is the state in which capillaries become dry and tightened. Lu Chang'an let go and pressed her body again. Naturally, there was no heartbeat. He originally wanted to scratch her skin with his nails, but considering her current condition, he decided not to do it and had to check her through other parts of her body. Overall status. You pervert, Zhu Huntang leaned against the wall, suppressing the strong evil excitement, and dumbfoundedly condemned Lu Chang'an. In her opinion, this was just a corpse. I'm just checking her physical condition. Lu Chang'an didn't feel anything about Zhu Huntang's sudden condemnation. This guy looked at it with great interest just now. After he finished the examination, he started talking nonsense. If he really thought he was a pervert, he should have just stopped it. What did you find out? Zhu Huntang didn't insist on condemning him. After all, her curiosity was fermenting and everything she saw was new and interesting. Her physical condition is worrying. The examination I just conducted was to determine whether she can still absorb the vitality I am about to give her. If the result of the examination is that it is impossible to recover, I will give up on her. Lu Chang'an's spirit of course can be wasted casually. Only living people and dying people who can be saved are worth saving. If he finds that her body is completely unable to absorb his energy, he will not do anything in vain. Is that possible? Zhu Huntang said anxiously. Ordinary people still have a benevolent heart that saves one life rather than building a 7-level pagoda. After all, the other party looks like he is dying, and there is no feeling of threat. I'll try. Lu Chang'an nodded. Zhu Huntang quickly opened his eyes, preparing to witness the miracle. Lu Chang'an bit the tip of his tongue, and a wound appeared on the tip of his tongue. A blood droplet with a diameter of less than 1 millimeter rolled out from between his teeth and stained his lower lip. Zhu Huntang felt something spread out from Lu Chang'an's lips, as if he smelled some fresh scent. These things entered Zhu Huntang's body like a smell. Zhu Huntang felt like a small sapling that had been poured with water,
bathed in the warm sunshine and absorbed the nutrients in the soil. Every cell in his body was happy. The ground is eager to grow. The bats outside the small temple became frantic, whizzing past the temple gate in droves. Zhu Huntang's eyes were particularly bright at this moment, shining in the moonlight. When he saw those bats, they also surged. He originally slapped the big bat was as big as a wash basin, and its ugly and shrunken rat face looked a bit ferocious like a ferocious beast. The moonlight moved away inch by inch, and on the land outside the temple gate, scattered weeds were growing wildly. In the post-autumn season, they turned out to be as dense as after being moistened by the rain in spring, and the surrounding trees became more dense. It rises from the ground, spreading its huge crown under the moonlight, densely blocking every inch of moonlight that tries to penetrate through the gaps in the leaves. Zhu Huntang's breathing gradually became heavier, and she always felt that something was oppressing her. She looked away from this surprising scene, lowered her head and found that her chest had swelled, and the originally cute size became similar to Qin Yinan's. She exclaimed. Pressing her chest, she could feel that her underwear was torn, and her white dress was as inappropriate as an adult wearing a child's clothes. Zhu Huntang had an incredible feeling of surprise, but there was a sharp pain on his forehead. Lu Chang'an actually hit his head again. Zhu Huntang fainted with this last thought. 2 in 1 chapter, please recommend monthly votes. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 452. Of course, Lu Chang'an did not force Zhu Huntang's interest. After knocking her unconscious, he picked it up and prepared to hang it on the wall. There were no hooks on the wall, and her skirt was too thin to hang heavy objects, so she placed it on the coffin lid and lay down. The purpose of knocking Zhu Huntang unconscious was to protect her, otherwise her body would be unable to bear the aura emanating from the essence condensed in her blood. Many pampered old people take a lot of tonic food. Rural people often say that this is the living old man's ginseng. What's more, Lu Chang'an has condensed the essence of the most primitive, thickest, and most vital blood since the birth of life. The aura exuded by this essence is simply not something that a little fat sheep like Zhu Huntang can bear. Just like a person who has lived in poverty for too long, a sudden meal of meat and fish may kill his life. On the other hand, some seriously injured people are full of nostalgia for life and have strong obsession and willpower, so they have a certain chance of absorbing the essence from their blood or reshaping their bodies. Possibly dying and rising again. Possibly dying and resurrecting to evolve. Or simply resurrected. The results obtained by each person may be completely different. Lu Chang'an is different from ordinary people. For ordinary people, losing such a small amount of blood will cause almost no damage to the body. However, Lu Chang'an will not divide his cells to create new blood all the time like ordinary healthy adults. If such a drop of blood is not necessary, he will not squeeze it out. The woman in front of him reminded Lu Chang'an of the movie about the birth of a vampire that he and Nuan watched together. This middle-aged Caucasian woman with a grey face is probably a vampire. Lu Chang'an has only heard of vampires, but has never actually seen them in reality. They are an extremely precious research material, and anyone who has done biological research knows that the value of living specimens is far greater. Higher than dead things. It was such a pity that a vampire died in front of him. She was much more precious than the giant panda. After so many years of life evolution, he probably only met one like this. Lu Chang'an had seen the demise of countless biological groups and was indifferent. That was just because those extinct ethnic groups are not interesting enough and have nothing to do with him. Lu Chang'an came to the top of the coffin, leaned over and lowered his head. His lips slowly approached the woman's lips, stopped 2 finger widths away, and spit out the blood that naturally condensed into a bead. Drops of blood fell on the woman's black withered lips. Lu Chang'an stood up, glanced at Zhu Huntang who was lying on the coffin cover, stretched out his legs to kick the coffin cover farther away, and then pressed his back on the woman's chest. If anything happened to her, he would react immediately to avoid damaging his mount. A swollen feeling came under his palm, and Lu Chang'an's eyes fell on the woman's face. The dead color on the black lips seemed to have been washed by the moonlight. The richness gradually receded and the light red condensed. The lime-white face seemed to be filled with water again after being dried by the sun. It was no longer dry and rough, but became tight and elastic. The entire body, skin, muscles, and bones, all felt rejuvenated. Lu Chang'an's palms could feel the rich vitality in the blood bead bursting out and being absorbed by this magical body. Just like the snow on the Tanggula Mountains, it melts into water and flows down, irrigating the thousands of miles of river basins covered by rivers. Wherever it goes, spring flowers bloom and insects and birds chirp. The originally loose and soft skin also swelled under his palm, expanding into the texture that a perfect body should have. The nails, which were full of blood and cracks, also turned soft and shiny under the moonlight. The whole fingers were no longer stiff and straight, but curved naturally. The pads of each finger were round and delicate. Onion. Lu Chang'an did not let go of his hand, but just looked at the face of a woman who still had charm. The faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes also disappeared, becoming flawless and refined, but the whole face did not look like a girl, it was still that of a mature woman. People. Just like touching Shang Guandandan's coffin, Lu Chang'an also felt the memory magnetic field remaining in this woman's body. Some bits and pieces of pictures. Lu Chang'an let out a long sigh. Not long ago, his memory was no longer very profound. He was not immersed in memories, because he was still on guard against any abnormality in the woman under his palm. Above the roof of the small temple, the bats dispersed again, no longer blocking the sky and circling around, and returned to the woods and under the eaves. The moonlight washes the top of the mountain again, and the thatch that originally seemed to have grown wildly is still scattered in piles here and there, revealing the dilapidated appearance of various broken walls. The 4 half-walls and wooden pillars of the Dragon King Temple left strange shadows. Under the bright moon, everything was silent. The woman opened her eyes. The pupils are still the color of blood, but have a lot more rich watercolor, and the dried tiny blood vessels in the whites of the eyes are no longer visible. The whole bright eyes seem to absorb the orbs full of spiritual energy under the moonlight, staring at Lu Chang'an quietly. Her lips opened slightly, and she exhaled a little fishy smell, and then her chest rose and fell. The breath she exhaled again had a sweet taste, like the feeling of some extremely delicious food that makes people salivate. She raised her hands little by little, held Lu Chang'an's hands holding his chest, then closed her eyes and breathed slowly. Seeing her calm appearance, as if there was no possibility of her losing control and getting angry, Lu Chang'an took out his hands. "Father, father." The woman felt Lu Chang'an's palm being pulled away, opened her eyes again, stared at Lu Chang'an, showed a calm smile, and shouted softly. This kind of calmness is the gentle expression of all the excitement and expectation, which have been refined by time into smooth emotions, filling the heart layer by layer, after getting what you want. Although she received no gentle response from Lu Chang'an's slightly embarrassed and indifferent expression, the smile on the woman's face remained unchanged. Thank you for saving me again." The woman looked at Lu Chang'an's face, her smile looked peaceful under the moonlight. "You don't remember me, do you? I may have indeed forgotten you before, but recently I watched a movie that told the story of a mysterious Orientalist and a singing girl in London, England during the time of Charles II." Lu Chang'an pointed to himself. He is the mysterious Oriental man, and you are the singer, but why did you call me father?" "Because you gave me a new life." The woman held Lu Chang'an's hands again, showing pious gratitude. "Now you have given me a new life again, father."